Unfortunately, I've been living in Singapore too long, because after 12 years, I came here at 8:30, thinking that things would start on time. As a result of which, I have lubricated my tonsils with far too many beers, which means I may be completely incoherent, so forgive me. Anyway, my name is Shamini Flint. Actually, my name is Shamini Mahadevan. And being a feminist, obviously I had no intention of changing my name to match that of my husband until I realized that Shamini Flint is the perfect crime fiction writer's name. Yeah. Sort of exotic and yet hard, right? So then I thought, okay, bugger feminism, we'll go with Shamini Flint. Yes, I've been living in Singapore for a while for my sins, but when Bernice invited me to read here, I was like, absolutely sure, delighted. And then this morning I read in the newspapers that there was a fatwa about looking like a tomboy. So I thought I would say to her, can I postpone this until my hair has grown a bit? But then I realized I needed more help than that, so I thought, forget it. But actually, my crime fiction, my Malaysian book, I have been assured by all my lawyer friends that it's completely seditious. So I'm expecting to be locked up for my own protection anytime soon. Which is good because that means that my sales will skyrocket on Amazon. Although actually Amir is here, so this is awkward because normally what I say is that sadly Malaysian reality, no fiction can match. And I normally prove this by reading segments from Malaysian politicians say the Dada stage, but I'm too embarrassed to do that in front of him. But if you want to know why your sales are spiking in Singapore, I want permission. Because you can't sort of match a sort of post-ironic Malaysian reality because in my book there is no sodomy, no Mongolian models, no black eyes, and get this, no yoga. So I mean, you can see that it completely fails to capture present-day Malaysia. In fact, my book has Inspector Singh, a ubiquitous member of the Singapore police force, who goes around Asia. This is very unlikely, and the reasons that he sort of gets from jurisdiction to jurisdiction really stretches credibility. But he goes around solving murders in, so far, Singapore, Malaysia, and Bali. These are the 3 books that have been purchased by Little Brown, but actually I had previously published them myself, and they are collector's items going cheap outside, because actually I'm not seriously actually allowed to sell them anymore. But who cares, right? But Criminal Minds will be coming out as Inspector Singh Investigates a Most Peculiar Malaysian Mystery soon. What I like to think about my books is that they're sort of part travel writing, part crime fiction, and part sort of politics. I mean, there's some really, really, really good Malaysian literature coming out right now by people like Peter and stuff, but I can't write literature. So I thought I would go for crime fiction, which with my lawyer past and stuff was feasible and didn't require much research. And also because I think at the end of the day, contemporary Malaysia, contemporary Asia is very exciting because of the way the various historical strands like colonialism and war and immigration are playing out in current society. So crime fiction is a great way to sort of explore Asian society. So I'm going to read you a tiny segment from Criminal Minds, soon to be Inspector Singh Investigates the Most Peculiar Malaysian Mystery. And then if I have time, I'll read you for my new children's book. So this is a bit, which I can't find, when Inspector Singh, having been sent to Malaysia to try and rescue the Singaporean woman who's charged with murder, is contemplating life in the back of a car. The thing about crime fiction is I can't read anything exciting because that'll give away the plot and it's supposed to be a page turner. And if you know what happens, then you won't turn the page. A heavy thunderstorm had reduced traffic to a standstill. The sky was dark, although it was still early in the evening. The rain fell like large teardrops straight down. It was a few years since Inspector Singh had been to Kuala Lumpur and he had forgotten the flash floods and gridlock that rain caused. Kuala Lumpur was just one large construction site, he thought, peering out of the window. There were looming cranes looking spindly and unstable in every direction. Every now and then, one of them would take a direct hit from a bolt of lightning that would light up the sky to the brightness of a tropical noon. In the briefly illuminated skies, jagged, half-built skyscrapers looked like twisted ruins. Concrete pillars to carry automated trains stood at regular intervals like giant sentries that had been petrified by some powerful enemy. The inspector thought the very skies were weeping for the 3 boys whose father was dead and whose mother was in prison charged with his murder. It was a fanciful thought for the taciturn policeman. The strange surroundings were affecting his natural balance. He found himself unable to forget the pain-filled eyes of the widow, Chelsea Liu, a ridiculous name, par for the course with the adoption of Western names by Singaporeans aiming to give themselves a cosmopolitan air. A sudden lull in the rain drumming down on the roof of the car interrupted his daydreaming. He realized that they had inched forward a few yards and now sheltered by a large 6-lane flyover. Both sides of the roads were jammed with motorbikes, their riders taking refuge from the rain under the looming concrete structure. The car lights glinted off their shiny plastic raincoats. A few youths were perched along the side of the road smoking cigarettes, probably the clove cigarettes from Indonesia, as if the fumes from the dozens of cars crawling forward in first gear were not sufficient poison to the lung. The inspector, who had started the day in Singapore in a bad mood, was now extremely irritable. He contemplated the sheer impossibility of the case that had been dumped on his lap as they inched forward towards their destination. How was he to investigate the murder of Alan Lee? He had no jurisdiction. The Malaysian police did not intend to be helpful. Inspector Muhammad was going to be a handful. He was being spied on by the young man patiently driving the car he was stuck in. And as if these things on their own were not a sufficient impediment, Chelsea Liu was not cooperating. He had assumed she would be full of suggestions as to alternative suspects, desperate to save her own neck. Instead, she seemed indifferent to his promised efforts and had given him no information to work with. All he had gotten was a grudging agreement that he should try and find the truth. And that, Inspector Singh admitted to himself, was the rub. Was he looking for the truth? Or was the most obvious answer, quickly seized upon by the Malaysian police, the correct one? Finally, they drew up outside the house of Inspector Singh's sister. The sergeant indicated that he would be around the corner, having dinner at one of the stalls that lined the streets in the evening. The inspector nodded and then, mentally girding himself for the encounter with his family, rang the doorbell. His sister, a large, big-boned woman with a nose Caesar would have been proud to possess, was dressed in a cotton kaftan, floral batik in hot pink. The material was frayed around the neck. She nodded to her brother and held the door open to indicate that he was welcome. They did not hug or kiss. It would have been completely out of character for either of them to have expressed emotion physically. Asians of their generation were not tactile. Affection was expressed, if at all, through food. To make an effort over dinner, to have a few extra dishes, to remember what someone liked best and serve it piping hot, that was the way to show family feeling. The house was furnished in what could only be described as traditional Malaysian Sikh. It was the end lot of a row of single-story terrace houses. The original thin strip of garden skirting the property on one side was built on as well as paved over. No blade of grass had survived the expansion. The interior was furnished with a heavy fake leather-brown 3-seater sofa with 2 matching armchairs. In the small sitting room it was oppressive. Handmade doilies, crocheted in white, hung on the back of each chair and on each arm. In an earlier era, when coconut hair oil was common amongst long-haired Sikh women, such protection for couches was prudent. In his sister's house, the doilies were merely decoration. Singh thought they were quite ugly. On the other hand, they reminded him of his boyhood and were also comforting. An Indonesian oil painting of a village scene in heavy dark brushstrokes hung on one wall. The purchase of cheap original art had been fashionable approximately 30 years earlier, and this painting had no doubt been an investment dating back from that period. No respectable Sikh family would buy art merely for its aesthetic qualities. Baljeet had been a widow for 30 years. Her husband had died of a diet of sweet desserts and sweet tea when all 3 of her children were under 5. Inspector Singh rather suspected that after the initial grief of the death of her husband, she had found the whole arrangement satisfactory. Money in the bank, complete governance of her children, and no head to the household. She asked now, "How is Dave?" He answered the inquiry about his wife brusquely. "Fine, same as usual. Still too thin? Not you, you should eat less. You know what happened to my poor husband." She poured him a mug of hot, strong tea, thickened and sweetened with condensed milk as she did this, and pushed a plate heaped with Indian sweets at him. "What is the use of telling me to diet and then serving me this sort of thing?" asked the inspector tensionly. He had only been in the company of his older sister for 10 minutes, and she was annoying him with the general trait of Sikh women of her generation, an ability to maintain a constant stream of insulting observations coupled with suggestions for his improvement. She changed the subject. "Why are you here?" "I'm helping out in a Malaysian murder investigation. The chief suspect is Singaporean," she said with relish. "I saw it in the newspapers. I'm not surprised she killed him, converting to Islam to keep the children." "It is not certain that she did kill him," pointed out the inspector. "Don't be silly, who else?" "That's what I'm here to find out." "You're wasting your time, though." Later that evening in the hotel room, Inspector Singh took off his shoes, peeled his socks off and wriggled his toes. Wrinkling his nose at the whiff of athlete's foot, he wondered if his sister was right. She was insufferable, but she did have a knack with her direct, tactless observations of hitting the core truth from time to time. The popular sentiment was that Chelsea Liu had killed her husband, and for very good reason too. The official line as adopted by the religious authorities was that any conversion to Islam had to be assumed to come from the heart. However, public sentiment was highly doubtful that a Chinese businessman of dubious repute, locked in a bitter custody battle with his abused wife, would suddenly find God, except as a matter of convenience. So that's the bit from